This podcast, on what appears to be a showdown between Israel and Iran, will begin in just a few minutes at the very top of the hour. Hello, I'm Andy Schmuckler. This is you might call a special edition of my Man on a Mission live stream. Apropos of what's developing here in what might be a significant world crisis. Yesterday, I was following on TV the continuous coverage from the time the announcement was made that drones, 100 drones, had been launched by Iran to attack Israel. And as that unfolded throughout the day, I found that there was a conspicuous absence in the discussion of what seems to me to be a major clue about what we should make of this whole situation. And what was absent was a discussion of the question, why did the Israelis, back on April 1st, attack the Iranian embassy or consulate or whatever it was to be called, but a major escalation was involved there. It was in Damascus, Syria, and it wasn't an attack on legally Syrian territory. It was an attack legally on Iranian territory. And everybody accepted that what the Israelis had done put the Iranians in a position where some kind of retaliation was going to be called for from the Iranian point of view, that they couldn't afford to do nothing in terms of the signaling that nations do to each other about don't tread on me. But what was absent was the question, well, why did the Israelis do that? The assumption has been that I certainly participated in since the beginnings of the October 7th atrocities from Hamas and the Israeli response to Gaza, that the Israelis would be eager to avoid a wider regional war. And in view of that assumption, it was kind of inexplicable why they would do something which was so escalatory, so clearly escalatory that everybody assumed that something would be coming back against Israel from Iran. So why would you launch such a thing? And last Thursday, I did a video here, which I think stands the test of time, except for my still being puzzled about what was the Israeli intention here in view of the fact that this was going to result in escalation at a time when I'm still assuming, incorrectly I think now, that the Israelis would want to avoid a wider regional war. And it's been interesting to me to notice, and the only reason I think that I have something to contribute here is that this particular piece of the matter puts things in a very seriously different light than if you start with the assumption, oh, well, Israel did that, and now Iran is attacking back with the drones, and then we subsequently learned also cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. It means, I think, that a decision was made in Israel by this Israeli government that an escalation between Israel and Iran was desirable. Then the question arises, why would it be desirable? And then the Iranians responded, and early on, the people were talking about, well, maybe this is just going to be these drones, and we get this announcement, and it's 700 miles and several hours where the Israelis, with some American help, get ready. So it's a gesture, maybe. Maybe this will stop at this point, and it won't mean a wider roll. It'll just be a tit for a tat without a new tit for a tat, and so on up the escalatory ladder. And the Iranians, along with that announcement, put out the word, when this is done, we're willing to call it finished. But if the Zionist regime makes another mistake, that was, they call Israel the Zionist regime, and makes another mistake, meaning attacks something of Iran that they cannot accept, then all hell can break loose. I don't remember exactly what the language was. It wasn't that. But they were saying, let's stop here with our retaliation. But if the Israelis attacked the Damascus embassy of Iran with the thought that let's have our showdown now, and I don't see how you'd come to a conclusion that, people, I heard people say, well, finally, there's this woman on MSNBC, Yasmin, and I don't remember her last name. She was the first one to ask, well, what was Netanyahu's government's motivation in launching this attack? And she got a lot of answers that didn't really compute very well as far as I was concerned. Things like, well, it was a target of opportunity. But as soon as that person, I think it was Representative Adam Smith, not the guy who wrote The Wealth of Nations, but it's another Adam Smith, said something like, it was a target of opportunity, but then he added, or somebody else added, the Israelis always are following these people that they would like to target, but they're frequently saying this isn't the time or the place. So why would this be the time and the place when they're engaged in this terrible situation where not only do we have the Gaza war, but we have a fair amount of tension on the northern border with Israel and Lebanon, with Hezbollah sending rockets into northern Israel and Israel bombing targets in Lebanon. And we got the business with the Houthis in the Red Sea, the Houthis being another Iranian aligned group that has been participating in what's been a sort of a low boil regional war, which has not just the Gaza component, but the Lebanon component and the Red Sea attacking the shipping component. So, and then somebody else says something like, well, I think that the Israelis wanted to send the message to the Iranians that they don't appreciate these Iranian terrorist proxies. Oh yeah, but this has been going on for 6 months. Why? What's new here? And then, but people were saying, well, the Iranians are responding, and maybe it'll stop here. Well, first of all, if the Israelis decided to attack this thing at a moment where I was still assuming you don't want a regional war, well, clearly that assumption isn't warranted. You wouldn't make a move like that is a significant leap. People haven't been talking until that attack about, well, the Iranians have to retaliate, but now they were. You wouldn't do that if you were if you weren't interested in seeing what you could effect between them. So even if the Iranian response was kind of this is the obligatory minimal thing that you got to do to maintain the Iranians need to maintain themselves as we are the big guys in this region, which is probably a big motive for them. And even for our own people, we can't take that kind of thing. But even if it was a minimal kind of a response, if the Israelis had decided before they attacked that embassy and killed some major figures that they didn't have to kill, and getting a few people off the board is really small potatoes compared to getting into a big exchange directly between Iran, not its proxies, but Iran itself and Israel, with Iran attacking actually on Israeli territory. People say, well, why didn't the Iranians attack some peripheral Israeli target, like some embassy someplace in the world? Well, the Iranians chose, even if it was just going to be the drones, they chose a not minimal way of responding. But even if it was minimal, it would give the Israelis an opportunity to keep going in the direction they obviously must have chosen to go, to have some kind of escalation in between them and Iran. And then it turns out, well, it wasn't just the drones. And the Iranians subsequently announced that these cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. So they were launching something which was far beyond what people had conjectured might be sort of take care of the Iranians' need to show up and saying, well, we aren't going to just take this lying down. Now it becomes a much more major attack. And General McCaffrey, who frequently comes on, he's retired. I think he's maybe 79 or 80 years old. And he's frequently brought on to comment on military matters. Now, McCaffrey's talking about this as so disproportionate. So I don't know how many people would agree that this was disproportionate. It looks like it, may have been disproportionate, and McCaffrey wasn't the only one who said this is disproportionate. If that's disproportionate, it means the Iranians, they may say, well, when this is done, we can be done with this and we can just go on. But if it's disproportionate, it seems that the Iranians have also gone in and said, we're not interested in this being the end of it. The Israelis probably would have responded even with just a proportionate response. But if it is disproportionate, then both sides are actually seeming to be choosing to have a major showdown. And so then the question might be, why would that be? And there's also the question, well, where is this going to lead to? And, I hate to think, and I'm not sure I have any particular insight, but the thing that makes me think I needed to come out here and talk is we look at what the Israelis chose to do, and it becomes clear that the assumption that I had been holding all this time, that they don't want to have a wider regional war, must not obtain. I mean, as I say in the video I did on Thursday, Netanyahu is a sociopath, but he's also very smart. And that would be stupid to just say, oh, well, we can take this general off the map and one of our targets and risk something as big as this. No, I think that calculation on the Israeli side should be understood in terms of what the Israelis and Netanyahu, perhaps in particular, have thought for a very long time, which is that the Iranians constitute an existential threat to Israel. And there have been a lot of times where apparently Netanyahu has wanted to go after Iran, and maybe the Americans have checked him, or people in his less fascistic forms of government that he's got this one for the last year and a half, but before that he had a more sane group around him, and ultimately they didn't do it. There are the existential threat that Iran poses is a function of a couple things. One is that Iran is a very powerful, big country, way out of the Israelis' weight class. But the Israelis have nuclear weapons, and now, thanks to Trump withdrawing from the deal that Obama negotiated, the word these days is that Iran is really right on the threshold of being able to put together actual nuclear weapons, and that's been something that the Israelis have been agreeing is a existential threat to the existence of Israel since 1994, which already is now 30 years. So this is a very big deal. Plus, the Iranians aren't just a power. They are a power that has at the core of their world purposes, their ideology is their antagonism toward the one Jewish state in this Muslim part of the world. And they have said that Israel should be wiped off the map, I think is the expression, at least translated into English. So there is a huge threat, and there's a question about how to deal with it. And my understanding over the years is that there isn't any easy. There's no. I don't believe the Israelis have a military means to eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat. Back in 1981, the Israelis did eliminate the Saddam Hussein's growing nuclear threat in Iraq. They bombed the Osiri reactor, and the Iranians learned a lesson, which is, you don't leave your nuclear program exposed to being destroyed by a mere bombing raid. And so a lot, but the Israelis may have some plans about how they might, if this war gets going and escalating, they've got maybe have some thoughts about how they can actually set back the Iranians. And this is a mere conjecture on my part, that they may also think that because the Iranian regime is not very popular at home, that perhaps something that in this kind of wider regional war might tip the Iranian regime over. And if a different Iranian government were to come into power, maybe that existential threat that's just my conjecture. And usually when you attack a country, even if it's unpopular, the effect is the rallying around the flag thing that we've seen here in America back after 9/11. So I don't know if they have any such thoughts. But there are great dangers to Israel too, not just from Iran directly, but as is often observed, Hezbollah, Iranian aligned big force in Lebanon, practically controls the country of Lebanon, though it's not the official government. They have, I gather, 150,000 missiles, some of them very accurate. Israel, if they have chosen the path of escalation and then gotten from the Iranians, yeah, let's do it. It's like watching a Western where the protagonist, whoever the protagonist is in this situation, and his antagonist, these two gunfighters we've been waiting to see, they sort of goad each other into, and then there's going to be a showdown out on the street. That's what it looks like to me right now. But if the Israelis are going for that, they are presumably putting on the table something which the Israelis have been very loath to get involved with, which is a real war between themselves and Hezbollah to their north. Since 2006, that has been avoided. And now that the Hezbollah has been armed with 150,000 missiles, some of which can strike particular accurate targets in Israel, that is a lot to have to deal with. Surely the Israelis, when they chose to attack that embassy in Damascus, must have been thinking about if the Iranians encourage, or even, I don't know if they can order Hezbollah, but if they unleash Hezbollah, and maybe, I don't know if Hezbollah is eager to do it either. Iran has been clearly not eager to get into a direct war with Israel during this Hamas half year we've been going through. And even less do they want to bring the United States in against them. But, so why would the Israelis risk all that? Well, maybe they can do something to the Iranian threat. But also, the Israelis, as far as I can see, have committed not only a crime, but a blunder in how they've dealt with the Hamas. They've jumped in. Hamas was definitely, as far as I can see, there's no other interpretation but that the atrocities of October 7th was to provoke Israel into doing, I think, essentially what the Netanyahu government has chosen to do. They've jumped right into the trap and done enormous damage, not just the 30-couple thousand Palestinians that they've killed, but destroying the Israeli standing in the world. Well, maybe they've got themselves so deeply into a hole, and they're making no progress about getting the hostages back, if any of them are still alive at this point. But they've also, completely ruined their reputation. They look like the thugs. But now, if you get into a war, little Israel against big Iran, maybe you you get people to stop looking at this blunder that they've done in Hamas, and they look at Israel in a different way, as the often really kind of very decent, even I would say wonderful in many respects, democratic society that is allied with the United States. So here we have the House of Representatives, which has been under the control of a group of people who have just been thwarting American national interests at every turn. In terms of our ally Israel getting resupplied with weapons, but also the Ukraine even more disastrously. Apparently they're going to come back, and it looks like there's a rallying around the American ally because everybody's focused on the Iranian attack and not looking at, well, is Netanyahu and his decision-making group in this war, are they manipulating this situation? And by the way, I like to introduce myself again as over the decades, I'm a very pro-Israel guy, not always a pro-Israel policy, and certainly not since this group took control, which I think is the worst elements of the Israeli population. But it does seem to have the effect of the Biden administration has been getting more and more hostile to Netanyahu's decisions and moving way too slowly, as far as I'm concerned, toward making aid conditional. All that's going away. So that's a big gain for Israel. Maybe that's part of the game. And it looks like maybe other allies of the United States will also rally to the support of Israel, because Iran is a problem for a lot of people. Iran is aligned with Putin. Iran is making trouble with other countries in the Middle East that are more aligned with the United States. Iran, since the overthrow of the Shah in '79, has been a real enemy of the United States that haven't had diplomatic relations with. So there may be, when you get to, not is this Israel versus Hamas, which is a threat to Israel, but not to the world at large, but Israel versus Iran, you get Israel, which has made itself into something of a pariah, welcomed back into the community of nations. Is that worth risking what they're risking? I don't know. They've made blunders before, but apparently it is working to change the focus of the world away from Gaza, where the cost-benefit analysis, not just for the Palestinians, but for Israel as well, has been very adverse. Hamas, is it destroyed? How many more terrorists have you created by creating more hatred for Israel in the world by what this Israeli government has done? The focus is going away from that and into this wider war. So I think the evidence suggests the Israelis chose to create a wider war. The Iranians, in their response, chose to give it to them. Now, people are still saying, well, it all depends on what the Israelis are going to do. Well, if the Israelis, I think they would have responded even to a proportional retaliation from Iran with a new retaliation, a new tit for their tat. But if it's a major strike, well, is there really any question? Well, there could be. There could be. The Israelis might change their minds. But if they had wanted to avoid a wider war, they would have to change their minds at this point to avoid it. Yeah, there's an analogy here that in the wake of what the Supreme Court did with the bogus Trump presidential immunity thing, I heard a lot of people saying, well, okay, there are going to be hearings. I think it's just like a week and a half from now. The Supreme Court's going to finally hear this thing, which wasn't even worth hearing to begin with, which could have been dealt with just as fast as the Nixon tape thing was. But no, they gave Trump from December, when it should have been decided, all the way to not even hearing the thing until late April. And people were saying, well, they could hear the case on whatever it was, April 22nd or April 25th. And I think it was 22nd at the beginning. And on April 23rd, they could hand down a decision, and it would be easy then for the trial to go back to the Chutkan's court, and everything could move forward, and we could get what the nation clearly needs, which is to get the trial going on this very important matter, the most important of the trials, to get it going so that the American people get the benefit of seeing what the truth of the matter is of Trump's guilt or innocence in time, so they know what's what before they have to vote. And my response to that was, well, if the Supreme Court had wanted people to be able to see the truth before they have to vote, they never would have behaved this way in the first place. Now, maybe they'll change their minds. I mean, the Common Cause just put in a friend of the court brief about the case, basically chastising the Supreme Court for actually behaving like they are aligned with Donald Trump to prevent the major public interest in getting this trial conducted from occurring. Well, maybe they'll change their mind. But if they had, the analogy is, if they had wanted this trial to take place in time to meet the great public interest, they wouldn't have done what they did in the first place. So they'd have to change their mind. We'll see if they do. If the Israelis had not wanted to get a wider war here, for whatever set of calculations they've got, having to do with the Iranian existential threat, or having to do with getting the Americans back on their corner, or having to do with getting the world to pay attention to Israel outside the context of their great blunders in Gaza, they would have to change their mind. And I don't think they're going to change their mind. I think the jeux sont faits, as they say in French. The bets are down. Now, it could be the Israelis are going to retaliate. I could conceive that they might retaliate in a way which is a downward slope in that escalatory slope that we've just been climbing since April 1st, and then again last night. They could strike back in some smallish ways that lead to the Iranians striking back in some smallish ways. Or, I think without there being a change of mind, they wouldn't have done it in the first place if they weren't envisioning sending their best fighter jets to hit major targets in Iran, and then we're off to the races. And what the hell that would look like for the rest of the world, I don't know. We're looking at history unfolding, and there are some uncertainties. But what doesn't seem to me to be super uncertain at this moment is whether that wider war is something that either side has decided it really wants to avoid. I don't see signs of that. The key to the issue is the question, why did the Israelis strike that embassy? And then secondarily, why did the Iranians choose to respond as powerfully as they did? Now, some people have suggested that because the Israelis, with some American help apparently, were able to intercept, I guess, 99% of everything that Iran threw at them, I guess 300 different entities from drones to missiles and such. Very little damage was done. I guess there was a casualty, some Bedouin girl in southern Israel. I don't know if injured or killed. But for the most part, Israel was able to protect itself. And some people say, well, call that a victory and you don't have to retaliate. And I guess I read this morning that Biden is saying to Netanyahu, stop, call it a win. Maybe. But they made a choice when they hit that embassy. And some kind of change of mind is required for the Israelis to look for an exit. If they don't change their mind, they're not looking for an exit. And if the Iranians don't change their mind, apparently they're not looking for an exit either. So the two gunfighters are out there on the street with their hands held at their holsters, and we got a showdown. Now, ordinarily, my live streams are Monday morning and Thursday morning. This is Sunday. I will be back on Thursday, tomorrow morning. Let me see if I can get, well, I'm going to, two topics that I'm going to be dealing with. One is I say that the central political battle in America today should be understood as a battle between democracy and fascism. That case can be made very strongly. And by the way, you can go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org, and see a big picture, which is what my mission is to convey. I'm going to look at the question of abortion, which is rising as one of the central issues of the political battle, and look at how that relates to the overarching issue of democracy versus fascism. And then to get into the still larger picture of what have been the forces that have been shaping the way human civilization has evolved since we first began on this path 10,000 years ago. I have a topic which I'm calling trampling versus fire drill. How you can't infer the nature of the creature from the effects of systemic dynamics. I have a better way of putting it, but basically it's got to do with the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large, any more than if you have a fire like at the Copacabana back in the 20s that people all got trampled to death. That doesn't tell you that all those people in that nightclub where the doors didn't open outward but opened inward, who got trampled to death, that you had a whole slew of people who are basically tramplers at it by their nature. Systemic dynamics sometimes dictate the direction in which things go. The whole is not to be understood simply in terms of the sum of the individual parts. The ugliness we see in human nature, in human history, is not human nature writ large. Those are a couple topics. There will be a couple of other ones. I like to go from the immediate things that we see in our newspaper to see how they all fit into a larger picture of the human story. So if you're interested, hope you'll tune back in. 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning. I'll be back. Thank you for listening to this one. Bye-bye.